Welcome to the Outer Circle, Inner Stillness, reflections on the sobriety way of life, the inner life, and the wonderful intertwining of spirituality and sobriety and the daily disciplines, daily practices that make them up. Late show edition. I am here at the microphone. It is late at night as I do this, and so you might get that feel to it. It is the middle of Great Lent, so it is a sober late night. Some of y'all might be disappointed about that, but I promise we'll have fun. There might be some dad jokes because there's another dad in the studio with me. So I would like y'all to meet Kevin. I completely blanked on your last name just now.
We don't need to share that. No, it's Roberts.
Okay. Right. I've known you for how long? Yeah.
2 years?
Kind of.
Does that sound right? Our wives would know.
Yeah, it's either 2 or 20, depending on how you measure.
Oh, well, fair enough.
Knowing. Yeah. So, yeah. There's some fun history we can share. But thank you, Kevin, for joining me on this lovely Wednesday evening to talk about all these things, spiritual disciplines, family, etc. Before the listener who doesn't know you, what's your corner of the world? Who are you? What do you do?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me and pulling me into something completely uncomfortable, just as Lent should do. I born and raised in Medford, Oregon. I have a janitorial business. My parents had a janitorial business growing up when I was growing up, and I recently took that over. I've been Orthodox for 14 and a half years. I was made a reader 3 years into that, and a sub-deacon 3 years after that. So I've been a sub-deacon for, I guess, 8 years-ish. So that's a good bit of my background. I have 6 children. I've been married 10 years, and so the oldest one is slightly less than 10. She'll be 10 in June. The youngest is 1, and there's twins in there. So there's a lot of entertainment to be had on a daily basis in my home.
That sounds delightfully entertaining. My dad was one of 6 as well, and family gatherings at Lolo and Lola's were always a hoot because big family and feelings and big family noises. It was great. It's sort of like you get around my dad's side of the family, and it's sort of like my big fat Filipino Christmas.
Nice.
Yeah, it was fun. I envisioned something like that for you, because it could be cool.
Yeah. We definitely, my mom and my dad had large Catholic families, so I am used to huge family gatherings, hundreds of people. Well, at least more than 100 people.
Yes.
Yeah.
That sounds like a lot of food.
True.
Yeah. So terms. So for the listener, so you mentioned you're a sub-deacon, which kind of makes sense. So a reader in Orthodox speak, it's sort of it's like a chanter, which you might see in some other traditions.
Yeah.
Closest approximation.
Yeah.
I'm learning to be a reader too, and it's been fun.
That's great.
Yeah, it's or for our more Protestant brethren, there's like our whole concept of worship is way different anyway, but it's sort of like the closest approximation to like one of the worship leaders. No, that's not even the right term, because there's the whole, I don't know, like the framework is a little different. We carry a lot of the services in like reading the Psalms, reading the hymns, kind of leading in some of the main melodies, unless there's a choir, and then they do that. But I don't know, calling us like Orthodox worship leaders doesn't feel right?
No, I mean, the concept is there, but there's a specific role that a reader has traditionally. And, thinking back 1700 years or something, not everybody could read, let alone out loud enough from the very few scrolls that they may have had to project properly so that everybody could understand what was being said. And books being so valuable, it was the reader's job to keep them safe, whether that was in the church building or to take them home after services, study them, read up on the readings for the following service so that it was done properly. It was a very, very specific role. Those were the main facets of that. And it hasn't really changed much, save that most people learned how to read out loud as a child. And back then it was not nearly as common.
Yeah. So, and the lead readers tell me, anybody can read these. There's that's a little bit more of a functional thing because, like, anybody who can read could read them, and so in that sense, well, one of the other readers, I'd asked him, so how will I know when I'm ready to be a reader? And he's like, well, when you read the Psalms, you're a reader. And I'm like, oh, okay. Uh, so in that sense, it is a really accessible function for everyone. But you're right, there to be tantred that way, to wear the robe, there's a degree of responsibility, which calls for a degree of familiarity with the texts and the tones, and preparing the texts and organizing the dozen books that go into a Matin service and everything.
Yeah, I don't know that I'd call it a degree of responsibility. It's far graver and more serious than that. Anybody can read in church, essentially. I mean, men or women, even the epistle. You do not have to be a tantrid reader. That is not a necessary thing that the church requires, is to have a reader to perform the services. It requires, different services require different things. But to become a reader, to be tantrid, it's called the first order of the priesthood. This is a lifelong commitment. It is not something you can walk away from. It is a vow that you make for the rest of your life. It is a very grave thing to even consider breaking that commitment. It can be done. People renege on their vows, but it's not proper. Right?
Once a reader, always a reader. Make it sound a little bit like marriage.
It's a similar type of vow as marriage. Just like being a monk comes with certain vows, certain commitments, of stability, of poverty, of obedience. The reader has a vow of obedience to the church. The archbishop is my boss. If he tells me to do something, I say, yes, Vladika, or, depending on the bishop, but, a sub-deacon has another level of the priesthood where they have the horarion, and this, binds them a further, it's an inner circle. And the reader has a lot of freedom in relationships, in that a reader can be married while a reader. A sub-deacon cannot get married. One must be married, or one will not get married once they are a sub-deacon. This is a very serious commitment. So if something were to happen to my wife, I would be taking care of my children for the rest of my life. And there would be nobody stepping into that specific role of a wife and a mother. So it's no joke.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, it's a path to salvation. I don't know if I will ever be made a deacon, but I'm on that path until a priest or a bishop gently removes me from that path.
Yeah.
Hopefully gently, but hopefully it
Well,
doesn't happen. I'd like to continue on this path,
yeah,
but things can happen, and that will be God's will.
for sure. So when you first became Orthodox, did you have this in
Yes.
mind for yourself to become a reader, to become a sub-deacon?
Not when I first became Orthodox. Um, it took at least a couple years. I was considering monasticism. It's not something that was presented to me as a Protestant. So I was in my early 20s when I transitioned into the Orthodox faith. And that exposure to monasticism was fascinating to me. I couldn't get enough of it. I visited St. Herman's at least twice a year, which is a monastery down in Northern California. Very rugged, very committed. Men who are committed. I wouldn't use the word disciplined, just because it's not the right word.
Mm-hmm.
They are committed. They are faithful to their calling, and yeah.
And there's a particular rigor to their lifestyle in the, like you said, the rugged nature of their location, the remote nature of their location. They do without a lot of our familiar comforts and excitements, and that's the nature of their spiritual athleticism, their spiritual labor.
They don't have temptations dangling in front of them, the worldly temptations that we're used to.
Not the same one.
Staring at a screen like we are now. Not that they don't have electricity or water or mattresses on their beds, but they, specifically the founder of the monastery, chose a spot where it wouldn't be possible to have these distractions, and it was a wise decision. There is fruit from their labors that is easily visible and tangible to hundreds of thousands of people around the world that partake of that.
Yeah. I felt that when I was there back in September. There's a sense of I've stepped out of the city. I've stepped into reality. I've stepped into the real world. That being the spiritual world, the inner world, and having a really beautiful and really quiet environment certainly is a great aid to the journey inward. It's possible to have an inner life, to cultivate an inner life, even in the midst of a metropolis. But it is a much different sort of rigor because, like you said, we have a lot of different things dangling in our faces, shining in our faces, things yelling at us, blaring at us, noise, noise, noise. And so it's a different kind of work to be a urban family man trying to have an inner life compared to being a monastic. And I know, like I've always been intrigued by monasticism as well. And I think if I had been exposed to Orthodoxy like 20 years ago, I might have gone that route, maybe. But I didn't. And now I have a wife and 3 kids, and I really love that, and I really love them. And I mean, I wouldn't trade them for anything. So alternate universe me can be a monk, and that's fine.
Nice.
Yeah. So I'd be curious then. So speaking about spiritual discipline, spiritual growth, and cultivating the inner life. So you've been on this journey, into the church, into the Orthodox Christian faith, and now into, like you talking about, these more higher callings within that. The grave calling of being a reader, the grave calling of being a sub-deacon. What are some ways that has shaped how you understand your faith and how you practice it?
That's a great question. I think some things that were drilled into me as a Protestant still hold true today. There was definitely some truth I found in that, and those have stuck with me. Specifically, I had a pastor that it was kind of a tongue-in-cheek joke. Like, the reason God has me here all the time is because I'd be out getting into trouble if I wasn't here, right? The pastor needs the church more than anyone. It's like, ha, 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 he's a great guy. He's just saying that to encourage us. It's like, no. This is exactly how I feel. I feel invigorated when I'm at church, when I'm worshiping, when I'm participating, when I'm investing, in riches in the next life, if you would. I think when I first became Orthodox, I was zealous, like many young Orthodox men are, and especially pseudo-intellectual Orthodox men who want to change the world and don't understand how that works.
You mean I can't believe everything I read on Twitter?
I wouldn't go that far, but probably not most of it.
Okay. Just so we're clear.
I understood enough about myself from gleaning wisdom from older, more wise men, leaders that I listened to and took some things to heart, specifically that I knew enough about myself to know I needed a hard path. Because I was going to stay in the world, I had made that decision to have a family. I needed more discipline. So when I referenced the monks not having discipline or not needing as much discipline, they don't have the distractions. And when you're inundated with these distractions, you need more discipline. I recognized that. I'm still struggling with this and hopefully making progress in the right direction little by little as I fall and get back up every day. I often would say, again, this is idiot Kevin who is overzealous and bursting out of my wineskins. I wanted to be a farmer, a full-time farmer, a full-time priest, and probably something other, a full-time father. I wanted to have a large family, homeschool, have a big farm, feed the world, and be a priest of a parish. Right. This is, no idea what any of these things cost as sacrifice in my own soul. But it sounded good. And I would say that to people. I want the hardest path I can manage. And this is the most difficult life I can think of in the world, is these things. And I thought in 10 years, I'll have all that. This is just total overzealousness. But obviously that's, an unrealistic goal, especially someone as undisciplined as myself. But I realized that I started toning it down. I didn't get discouraged. I just simply learned that these things come with blood, sweat, and tears, not just ambition and daydreams. And some of the lessons along the way have been very sobering, and I've cried, and I've, despaired a little bit, and I've lost things that I thought I would keep, and I have changed my trajectory slightly. I'm not exactly where I thought I would be, but I'm staying faithful to my family, my church, and my farming dreams, which is the one that has been put on hold, as it should have been. But I still have those dreams. I've just learned some temperance. Some, I think, learn those. It takes a long time to learn those lessons for some. Some people come into it understanding that zealousness can be very dangerous. I think I think that answered your question. I think that in order to keep my sanity, in order to keep progressing in the spiritual life and in the physical life, the mental life, I've had to be more disciplined. And I'm not a self-disciplined person. I am pretty classically ADHD. I'm an ENTJ personality type. I am a people pleaser. I have all these faults that are serious faults, or at least proclivities, tendencies. They can be used for good, and I'm learning that. But just having a schedule, having good communication, it is difficult. But these things that you think you might be able to just skip past, you can't skip past them. The basic things in life, the things you hear all the time from people you might not like to listen to, whoever it might be, motivational speakers, I wouldn't necessarily emulate their lives, but some of the things they say, don't take for granted, like getting enough sleep and eating healthy and, brushing your teeth and cleaning your room. It's like, yeah, I don't need all that. I just need to live a life of poverty and say my prayers. And it's like, no, you'll get so distracted. You'll have such a big mess in your icon corner.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have the discipline to say your prayers when there's clothes in the way. It's like, oh man, I don't. How did I get here?
Yeah.
So-
I'm remembering what can sometimes show up, this sort of like, oh, me and Jesus mentality. It's like, as long as I got my Jesus, maybe my coffee too, I'm good. Not factoring in like, I need my community around me, or I need to care for my body, or this me and Jesus walk. It's not just this like abstract thing I think about, but it's this full-bodied lifelong process. And yeah, there's a way. Yeah, I mean, even in Orthodox circles, we could, look at someone like, Saint Jacobus, Saint Porphyrios, or, the Desert Fathers who, like, barely sleep and barely eat and wrestle demons, and are like, wow, that's cool. That's a real Christian. But they're they're not like us in a sense, because monasticism is a super different calling. For us mere mortals, and we're not sub-Christian or subhuman. We have to do things like sleep and eat and work out, and sometimes check out and just be like, I need a break. I need to watch a movie every now and then.
Yeah, there's a level of humility to understanding our weaknesses, our limitations, to understand that, we're not strong enough to lift this much weight. Start with the weight you can lift. You can only stand being at the gym for 20 minutes. Go to the gym for 20 minutes. The consistency is going to be more important. It'll keep you from falling into despondency. And you're getting stronger, even though it might not feel like it. At least you're staying in shape.
At least you're staying in shape physically. But like you said, the consistency, at least you're building a habit, and a habit becomes a way of life. And yeah, I also strive to care for my body in that sort of way, and I have a gym membership, and I try to use it pretty regularly. And like, if I can't get to the gym, I do push-ups or something. Yeah. Again, the idea being is like, well, like any one workout will or won't feel like kind of like cool productive, but it's the cumulative. Like, when I've been swimming and stretching consistently for months at a time, I feel clean, I feel awake, I feel limber, and that feels good. So I was really resonating when you were talking about why you opted to pursue the trajectory through reader to sub-deacon, and it was bringing out different parts of me that resonate with that too. I'm coming at this, also growing up, in a very Protestant environment. We went to the same church as kids. That was how we knew each other a little bit. I knew who you were. I knew your brother a little bit more.
Knew of each other, yeah.
Yeah. And then many years later, I stumbled into Archangel Gabriel parish, and like realized, oh wow, like, it's Kevin, like, who was a little kid back last time I saw him. Anyway, But so I'm coming into the Orthodox Church, having been in my own sobriety recovery process, and
Mhm.
having gone through my own counseling process and had to work through my own traumas and attachment failures and everything, and having proclivities, to put it delicately. And I know one of the reasons, well, when I asked my priest if I could become a reader, one of the reasons was just to learn the tones, because there were a lot of them, and I figured, if I can't have it up in front of my face, I'm just not going to get it for years and years. Granted, it's still been years and years that I've been trying to learn, but the other main reason was I was able to see, uh, I don't always want to be in recovery. I don't always want to be Orthodox. I don't always want to be with my family. I mean, I love them. I love all of those things, but my inclination, my interest in pursuing these other really radically intense experiences is really strong and still really present even years into recovery. And I knew the pull of these things is really strong, and I need the pull of the church to be stronger. And for me, at the time, it seemed like to have some sort of official rank, title, position, responsibility would be that extra bit. And so that was a lot of why I did it. And it does it when I have still been very tempted to do some things. There's a sense of oh, but I couldn't be a reader if I did that, or I couldn't participate in the church this way. I couldn't do it cleanly. And there is something really powerful about like I talked about, choosing the harder path. And there's a lot of ways that difficulty can show up, and it could show up as something more like struggling, more like suffering, or it could look like just like a stronger rigor, greater expectations, having to be a little bit more prepared, a little bit more, having to just hold more knowledge in your head. Um, but I was resonating with that as, and I guess in a sense too, outside the church. I mean, I'm an addictions counselor, and I lead support groups, and I have been working to create this recovery community, and I'm kind of their leader. And so there's a sense of well, if I relapse or if I blow it, that would look pretty funny to this community that I'm part of. And so there's that pull on me, and sometimes I need that. Sometimes I have the wherewithal in my own self to be cool, calm, collected, and sane. And sometimes I don't. And it's been really fortunate for me that I have dozens of people around me expecting something of me. And then when I rise up to that expectation, I'm saved.
Yeah. I think that being in community, even for the introverts, is still something that is necessary for the proper structure of life. There's a place for them. Usually it's the introverts, or sorry, the extroverts that are crossing the boundaries into people's bubbles and guilty as charged, over and over. But I'm learning. My wife is an introvert, and I have learned a lot about introverts through marriage, which is one of the beautiful things about marriage, is that you get to experience the life of two different people in a more real way than I was expecting, at least, as a pre-married person.
I hadn't thought of it quite that way. That makes it sound like getting a bonus of oh wow, I get two lives for the price of one.
It is.
Or in your case, two.
It is a bonus.
Yeah. Or in your case,
if
two lives.
If you're doing it right.
If you're doing it right, yeah. Or
Not,
2 lives for the price of 8 or something.
Yeah, I'm learning. I'm just, the first 5 years of my marriage, which is half my marriage, I had no idea how to communicate with my wife because I didn't understand what it meant to be an introvert, what it meant for her to process. I don't know, how much people understand, listeners, about personality types, but Myers-Briggs, I'm an ENTJ, she's an ISFP. And 5 years in, we took this test, found this out, and reading through things online, it's like, oh yeah, there's the lowest compatibility and personality types between these two types. Like if you're an ISFP, run from ENTJs. They will steamroll you and steal your joy, and you'll never get a word in. It's like, oh no, this is what's happening. Hey, sweetie, is this what's happening? Like, yeah, this is exactly what's happening. We speak totally different languages. And there are some things I still do not understand how to communicate to my wife. Just in the last week, Lent brings these things out very effectively. It wasn't anything too serious, but it's like I had to preempt the conversation with like, I know you're going to feel attacked by this. I need to say this. I don't know how to say it any other way. I want you to understand I'm not attacking you, but this has to be said. And sure enough, I had to explain myself for 20 more minutes, and we did not see eye to eye. And it's like, I need to learn, I've been pondering that ever since that conversation. Like, how do I talk to my wife? It's so strange that I have to figure out something like this. I just never could have imagined that this is what marriage was like. That I have to figure out how to say things correctly.
Oh yeah, the marriage communication. We'll have been married 15 years this summer.
Congratulations.
And
that's
thank
awesome.
you. Thank you. I glory to God in all things. I've put her through a lot and hurt her very deeply, and she's forgiven me very, very deeply. And yeah, she might be the saint of the two of us. But yeah, there are a lot of these moments still where it's like, oh, I just learned this about you. And those moments can be kind of cool. I mean, it's sad when they have to be preceded by a fight, but when a fight can turn into a moment of insight, there is something kind of exciting about that. But I'm totally resonating with the sense of like, I don't know how to talk to you. And I didn't think like the introvert extrovert thing mattered so much, but oh my gosh, like there's this thing. But I really love that you're bringing this up. Again, thinking about why do we need people? Why do we need community? Why are we often better off being partnered than not? And there is this misnomer, I think, that a good relationship is one with a lot of things in common, a lot of high compatibility. People talk about relationships this way. People talk about groups this way. Oh, I like this group because like I have a lot in common with the people there. I relate to the people. Oh, I like this partner because we just are really compatible. We never fight. We see things the same way. We do all of these things together. And there is something really nice about that. And there's a place for that because that sort of relationship environment allows for kind of an easy connection. Sometimes we need that for reasons. But I'm coming to start to discover that the really good group and relationship experiences are ones with different people, because then I really encounter the other, someone who's different than me. And then I get to make the journey to encounter the other, to know them, to see them, to be known by them. And that takes more work. But then I learned something. It's like you were saying, I got two lives in the same experience, and I got multiple perspectives, and I get to learn from this other person and see, oh, here's how another person exists. What can I learn from that? What do I learn about myself as I approach this other? And so in that sense, having a partner who's really different can be really enriching. Also incredibly frustrating. And I mean, me and my wife are really different in some ways that are really frustrating for me too, and I imagine really frustrating for her. And so it's work. It's absolutely hard, rigorous work. And same with the community. Maybe more so because now you have 300 people at a parish who do things differently, or 6 dozen other parents who all parent differently, and they're all wrong. But so there's a lot more work, but the payoff of I'm part of something. There's this network around me, and now I've discovered in myself this capacity to be with others and to be okay, and to realize they're okay too, and we can all do this worship thing together. And it still works.
That was good. I thought I was going to have a comment on that, but you just drove it home, and that's a really good point. I think I wanted to comment on you had mentioned, I don't know, a few days ago that we might talk about peace, how to be at peace in a family this large, in church, in life. And that's something that my personality type does not have the proclivity towards at all. My wife does. And I get to see an example of somebody at least striving for stillness, peace, silence. It's not something like, if you put me alone in a room, I'm just going to sing and dance and make up games and, game out a book or a farming plot or something. I'm going to be active, and in maybe not the best sense. Overactive, hyperactive. This is my proclivity. So, there are things I love about Orthodoxy because I can be involved in a lot of things. I can make food for trapeza. I can put out candles during the service, walk my kids around and kiss icons. I can sing in the choir. I can serve in the altar. I can help clean up after church. I can, whatever it might be. I mean, there's so many things that I can and often am involved with doing because, it's a small community and everybody has to pitch in. I want to be part of the men's group. I want to be part of the book study group. I want to be part of Thursday morning coffee. It's like, I'm there. There's people. I'm there. Like, this is what I want to do. But it's like, okay, now, your family's out of town on a camping trip. Are you going to do your prayers? It's like, well, a little, maybe.
But then I'll do all of these other cool things too.
Right. Well, I just get so busy. I don't have the discipline. I don't have the structure in my own soul. There's so many roadblocks that I haven't learned how to overcome. Now, I don't beat myself up over that. I'm on the path toward doing all my prayers and preparing for services properly and whatever my responsibilities are at church or at work. This is something that this year, especially of all years in my life, I've been getting it from every direction because I'm now a business owner, which is new and exciting and terrifying, just like marriage, just like becoming a sub-deacon, just like the thought of having a farm and, being responsible for animals. And, it's a big responsibility. I want to take it seriously, so I'm not rushing into it. So finding that time, that place in my soul. I've been there before. I'm not sure if everybody's been there. Our men's group read a good book called Acquiring the Mind of Christ by Archimandrite Sergius from St. Tikhon's in Pennsylvania-ish. I believe it's an OCA monastery. He's come and talked in Southern Oregon a couple times. His book was fascinating because he outlines this place of prayer and grace that I think he takes for granted that most people have experienced this. I think most Christians probably committed to Christ because of some experience like this, whether Protestant, Catholic, Orthodox, whatever. We've had that moment where God became real. And it's a foundation. And he expounds on that, and that this is where saints go. God gives us the grace of experiencing this thing, some of his essence, his grace. It's God himself. And it's a trope within Orthodoxy that our spiritual life is like wandering through the wilderness, like the Israelites, where you have this, baptismal moment through the Red Sea. They've conquered Pharaoh. They're on top of the world. And now what? You've brought us into the desert because there were no graves in Egypt. We miss the hot pots and swine's flesh, as the canon of St. Andrew says, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, now what do we got? 40 years of pretty much nothing. Like, there were some highs, there were some lows, but it's pretty much, they're in a wilderness. Go look on Google Earth on the Sinai Peninsula and think about living there for 40 years. I mean, it's insane.
There's a lot of sand.
Yeah, there's some grass in a spot, a little bit, kind of, but that's it. Like, it's just super rugged.
Yeah. But that metaphor is so powerful for...
Oh, yeah. It's better than a metaphor.
Yeah.
I mean, it's true.
Yeah.
It's truer than a metaphor.
Yeah. And I think what we're discovering is when we see this in Orthodox life and in the Orthodox faith, I see it in like long-term sobriety, or people who are striving for long-term sobriety, or striving to string together more than a few weeks, few months, few years of clean time. You think we see it in marriage, we see it in parenting, the sense of all of these good things take time. And going through like a long-term, lifelong, multi-decade commitment of any sort, it will have these really hot, sandy, desert, barren, forsaken feeling, doldrum moments, eons of time, that are just like an inherent part of what we do. And I get the sense that a lot of people get there and they feel like something's wrong, or I failed, or this isn't right for me. And the opposite is true. Yeah, you're actually right where you need to be. And more to the point, I mean, especially this makes more sense for Christian people, but God is there in the desert with you. And there's some ways, like the children of Israel, I mean, they were kind of like, pushed into their desert experience. But there were, other people like, Holy Prophet Elijah, St. John the Forerunner, even Jesus himself, like they sought the desert. They, fled to the desert for safety, for spiritual refuge, for spiritual growth and labor and everything. And these struggling, suffering times are really valuable. I'm thinking about something you were talking about earlier, the sense of like, I want the hard path. And it's a thing that there's this massive like frame shift in that, from like a lot of society, which is like, I want what's easy, I want what's comfortable, I want what's compatible and what's pleasurable and what makes me feel good. I don't want pain, I don't want suffering, I don't want things quick and fast and hot and shiny. And the hard path is none of those things. But that's how you grow. So,
yeah. So this idea of, this metaphor, if you would, going through the desert, Archimandrite Sergius, he makes the point that to get back to that place of grace takes work. And we find it in the liturgy, the divine liturgy, communing with Christ in the Eucharist. And we receive that grace again. It's that same essence of God coming and touching us. And we need to cultivate that, bring it out into the world with us, where we must go. The priest will go home and lock the doors at most churches. You can't stay. The liturgy has a beginning and an end for us who are locked in this non-eternal time. And to bring the liturgy out into the world, it sounds nice. Again, it's like, oh, cool, yeah, take Jesus with you to everybody and share the love. It's like, It's a little harder than that. It's not necessarily complicated. It's good, and it's a simple thing to do, but it's difficult. It takes practice, it takes discipline, it takes structure, it takes community, it takes faithfulness of and faith, believing that what you're doing is beneficial for your salvation. And there is an aspect of what I was mentioning earlier, all the things that I can find myself busy doing. Those can be beneficial, but there must be balance, there must be moderation, and there must be stillness, there must be asceticism, there must be inner life, there must be prayer, there must be a communication with God, not just assuming, but actually, right? So the thing that destroys relationships is how do you say it as a psychologist? It's like unmet expectations, right? Unmet, uncommunicated expectations. Like, this is something that comes up frequently in my marriage. Like, hey, I thought you were going to do this. I never said I was going to do that. Why did you assume I was going to do that? Did you ask me to do that? It's like, no, I'm bad at communicating, and I shouldn't have projected my desires onto you without letting you know. It's like, okay, now apply that to your relationship with the infinite being who created the universe. Like, he can talk to you and he wants a good relationship, but how much of this is you projecting and assuming, and him not meeting your unmet or not meeting your unspoken expectations, or however you want to say it? It's not one-to-one. He's not just a human, but there is good communication that has to take place in the relationship.
Yeah, it sounds like you're seeing your relationship with God and your prayer life as maybe more interactive and more like, I actually need to show up and take an active role in this. Is that kind of what you're saying?
I'm saying that the kingdom of God is within you, within me, and I have failed more often than not to get to that place where I'm truly communicating with God. I mean, there's so many metaphors that I can think of that I've heard over the years, from pastors, from priests, but just simply, no metaphors. I don't delve into God within me to speak with my nous. My own thoughts get in my way. I don't take the time to get past that. I don't take the time to get back to that place of grace. It's something that takes going through the desert. I'm not expecting God to give me that. I've learned that I can't. It doesn't come that way of like, come on, God, I've been Orthodox 14 whole years. Where's all the grace? Like, I had it before for a little bit, and everything was so easy, and I couldn't get mad at anyone, and I did way more prayers, and I was so motivated, and I talked to everybody about Orthodoxy and the beauty of our faith, and tried to and now it's like,
and the novelty wears off.
In a way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've had that ebb and flow.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not about feelings. It's not about emotions. It's about faithfulness. And I trust that regardless of whether or not I experience the grace of God in that way ever again, this is the path to that for eternity.
Mm-hmm. We talked about proclivities a lot, and proclivities and struggle in these desert times. And I wonder if you could say a little bit more about how to begin resisting a proclivity, or we could say like resisting a temptation, or like in like clinical speak, like navigating a craving. Because it seems like we're both talking around that's something that needs to happen, as well as a sense of like I need to start putting effort into something.
You start small. That's
Okay.
the first answer. That is so important. So this is why we fast, right? I mean, just almsgiving aside, other aspects of the fast that are inherently part of it, prayers, maybe not aside. I think we can include prayers, but either way, you start small. So Adam and Eve fell through not fasting. There's something intrinsically tied to our nature in consuming foods that leads us into temptation or leads us away from temptation. St. Paul talks about, subduing our flesh to overcome the carnal man. And fasting, the first step of it is obedience, right? We have spiritual fathers and they know our weaknesses because we confess our weaknesses to them, and probably usually they know them without us confessing. But they know us intimately. And the first step, I should say, first step is confessing. If you want to be healed of your proclivities, of your faults, of your weaknesses, of sin in general, confess it. And there is a healing that takes place in the sacrament of confession. Okay. Part of repentance is now doing things to root out the passions in your body, in your soul. Fasting is the way I thought about it when I was a young Orthodox Christian was, if I can't say no to this cheesecake, my favorite food, right, or lasagna, how am I going to say no when some, I don't know, strange woman comes up to me and wants to flirt or something? I mean, it usually ends up being the internet. Like, how am I going to say no to this ad or this, whatever it might be, this thing that is catching my eye? Sometimes it's a bottle of wine. Sometimes it's a cigar. Sometimes it's, what are my weaknesses? How am I going to say no if I can't say no to this food? Like, I don't need cheesecake, but man, I want cheesecake. Like, this is something I've never, for 22 years of my life, restricted myself from. It's like whenever I wanted to eat whatever, I ate it. And now it's like, oh, I think that there's a spiritual benefit to this fasting thing. Like, one, I'm in obedience to my priest. I am fasting as much as he says I should. I can fast more than some and less than others because of who I am, the strength that God has given me, whatever. I am where I am. I try to bear my own cross and not other people's crosses. So fasting, I believe, and this is, take fasting to mean not doing bad things also, because we fast from sin. It's like, well, you should always fast from sin. It's like, yeah, but it's really hard.
No, we don't. Yeah.
But it feels, we're a week and a half in now to not eating meat and dairy and olive oil and whatever things, alcohol, right? Week and a half in, most days, right? No fish. And it feels a little easier. Now, when I was first Orthodox, I could not explain how I all of a sudden was so angry, so agitated. All I could think about was the things I couldn't have. And I was so mad at whoever invented fasting and the Orthodox calendar. And why isn't today a wine and oil day? Why do I have to wait till Thursday? Dang, I just need a glass of wine. It's like, but why? Like, what is it about you? Can you make it? Can you make it to sleep? And sometimes we just have to distract ourselves until we fall asleep. Sometimes that's the best we can do. I've been there so many times where it's like, I'm just going to go crazy. I just got to distract myself so that I don't do something worse. That's not good. It's not ideal,
But
but
as a start,
it's a technique.
yeah. And
It's
like you're saying, you start where you can.
it's like, yeah, it's like if you want to stop, I've never smoked, but you hear people say, like, if you want to stop smoking cigarettes, well, you got to replace it with something. You can't just leave that hole in your life. You need to chew gum, or you need to drink water, or drink something healthier than cigarettes. Do something better with that craving until you retrain your body to crave the new thing or to mitigate the craving, right? All of our sins are addictions. They all ought to be treated that way. And, if you want to go through a 12-step program with gluttony and pride and lust and, all the vices that humans have thought of, that would be beneficial. If you have the discipline and the structure to do it, that is a path toward rooting out the passions.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to start small. I've never done a 12-step program either. I've read a little bit about it. There's a good podcast on ancient faith by Father Christophe Laputra, Healing Addictions. I would assume you're familiar with it, but maybe not.
I am familiar. I would highly recommend it.
Very good. And part of the reason I listened to that podcast was to help me root out some of my sins that I struggled with, and I could not figure out how to do that. I also felt like I was on a fast path toward giving other people spiritual advice, which is very scary. The idea that somebody might take my words and believe them and act on them just because I said them. That is one of the gravest things I can imagine. And, Christ doesn't have a lot of good things to say about people who teach people wrongly. That's serious.
Yes, very serious.
So I'm uncomfortable doing this, but I believe what I'm saying is at least rooted in, the truth of things that I've heard from much wiser and humbler people.
From my perspective too, the things you're saying are very close to the things like other people say about this too. Like when we talk about how do you grow spiritually, how do you succeed in sobriety, how do you cultivate the inner life, there's only so many things that are good for that, and the people that have been practicing it, they tend to find those things or the variations of them, and they might call them different things. We might say like temptations versus cravings. We might talk about sins and traumas or burdens or different things, but there's you kind of get a feel for like here's what the path looks like. I mean, maybe a couple different shades of it, but there's very definitely here's the path inward. Here's a path toward holiness. Here's a path toward Christ, toward enlightenment. Here's a lot of paths not toward that, and the difference becomes apparent pretty quickly. But I love what you're saying and highlighting how it's a long process. It can start small. It can start slow. It just needs to start. And the consistency is that absolutely a thing. And not just the consistency on your own, but in a community. And it's a thing where, universally in my field, like group counseling, support groups are recognized as, just about like the most effective intervention for just about every condition is to be with people, to be participating in a shared struggle together. And there's a lot of people who are like, I don't like groups and I don't relate to the people and I don't like them and I'm better than them and they make me triggered and this thing and this thing and this thing. I don't know what the value is of group and things. But for us who have discovered that, I mean, we've discovered a treasure there, and then you and me were talking about this added layer once you've been at it for a while of taking on some responsibilities. It's not just about me, and it's not just about what I can consume or receive from this community, but how can I participate back? How can I contribute? How can I become part of the fiber of whatever this community is? I'm kind of like taking steps that way in my life. You've taken some big steps in your life, and I'm presuming that's been a helpful thing for both of us to take those roles. Just like I see in the recovery communities, at some point, you get to where you need to start taking on sponsees to ascend to the next level of involvement in whatever your home group community is. So,
Yeah, I definitely want to respond to two different things you said.
Yeah.
It won't be an actually, but
I can.
I think it's important, and this is just one of the ways my brain works, is seeing a macroscopic level. And I think saying that we've found a treasure in community is such an introverted thing to say, right? It's like I don't think. Sorry, extroverted. I think an introvert would not see it as a treasure. Like, I don't think there's any treasure for them there. Maybe, but community is not necessary for salvation. Now, no man is an island. You cannot be saved alone, but you can still partake of the church, the liturgy, without necessarily being involved in the community in that way. Like, my bucket gets filled by being around people. My wife's bucket gets drained by being around people. If that is I don't know if that's a common like concept for people with like having their bucket filled or not.
I think so. I think
we use it a lot, and so I think it's important for. I'm sure some of your listeners are introverted. To understand that you don't have to be involved in community. You can go into your closet and say prayers and be saved. You can go into the desert and be alone and completely reject the world. That's okay. Probably some monasteries are too big for a lot of introverts, even though most modern monasteries are fairly underpopulated. I think it's just important to understand that Orthodoxy has the path to salvation for everybody of every possible makeup and consistency and character and personality type. It encourages them to express themselves in a genuine way while still adhering to the rules of the community, if you would. But there is a path to salvation for every single person, for handicapped people, for paraplegics, for whatever, children, babies, really old people, whatever problems they may have, whether they're physical or mental or emotional, any kind of traumas. You can be Orthodox, and there is a path to salvation that is hopefully, I can't speak for every priest at every parish. Like, they have weaknesses, they're humans, but there is power just in the church to help heal people. They don't have to do some of the other things. You do have to cultivate the inner life. You do have to stand before Christ at the last judgment, just you, and account for your actions. So that's the first thing. We'll see if I remember the second thing. Oh, the other thing you said was people taking responsibilities within the church. I think it's also important to understand, I mean, it's along the same vein, that being a reader is not going to make you any more pious or holy or closer to God. God chooses to call some people to fill the roles that he needs filled. Has created the order for humans to fill within the church. And some are called to priests, some are called to be choir directors, bell ringers, candle makers, etc., bookstore organizers, and table wipers. So again, you don't have to do any of that. It can be good to work, to contribute, but it's not for everyone. Not everyone is a teacher, not everyone is a benefactor, not everyone is a Sunday school organizer, etc., etc. Not everyone can make the best cheesecake in the world. Only Luke Martin can. There's a shout out to Luke's cheesecake. He won't listen to this probably, but maybe somebody knows him.
No, you're right, and I appreciate that balancing thought that there are many ways to participate in the church. And there are many ways, like just there's a correlate there. There's many ways to live a sober life. You kind of within a range, within a parameter, and and I would stick with this thought of like I would say maybe everyone should seek a deeper level of participation, but that could also be like, hey, I may only ever stand at attention in the liturgy, but my deeper participation is I listen more. I actually sing along with it. I sing if I can't sing, or I talk to people, or I stay awake for the whole thing, or something. There's a lot of there's a lot of ways to really take ownership of your own process and really delve deeply into it and be a really active participant without ever having official capacity, job, title, horarium, or anything. And that is really important. But it does come down to having that sense of there's a more available and I want it. And I'm going to do what I can slowly by slowly to strive after it. It just might not ever have a cassock attached to it. And that's fine.
Absolutely. I mean, ultimately, only men are in this role, right? And some of our greatest saints are women. They did not need holy orders of any kind to attain their sanctity.
Very true, indeed. I'm gonna cut us off there, just because I can't handle the glory of it. also it's late and I'm tired. But I appreciate very much you sharing some stories and perspectives and some thoughts and some conceptual thoughts and some practical thoughts on the inner life, and especially for people who are in positions like you and me. I mean, we have families, we have businesses, we're seeking more active roles in the church is where we're at, and just wanting to be better and having a lot of proclivities to resist. I really appreciate you speaking to all of those things.
Thank you. I really appreciate you asking me to do this. I was a little anxious about it, but I know you, we're friends. It was a good conversation.
Yeah.
I would even say with some reticence, we could do this again sometime. And even with no preparation, just like this. So it was fun. Thank you.
Thank you. If a listener wanted to reach out to you for more conversation, you could say where you can be found, or I could put it in the liner notes. But
I will be reading the epistle Sunday morning. No.
Okay.
Yeah, you can put. If you have notes, that'd be fine. I can share an email address that I check from time to time.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Sounds good. So, excellent. Thank you. So, listener, if you want to talk to Kevin more, you have to look for his email in my liner notes, and it will be there. All will be revealed.
Somebody might even be able to stalk me on Facebook. I do have a Facebook, but that's the only social media account I have.
Fair enough. Which is maybe better for all of us. But thank you so much, listener, for being with us. For my own part, you can find me I am on Facebook as well, I'm also on, this podcast is on Instagram at New Pattern Counseling. That's my clinic that sponsors the podcast. You can follow the podcast on the podcast Patreon, patreon.com/outer circle. Some dollar support would help me do this more and better. And then I can maybe send gifts to my guests also. So please consider joining the community in that way. Please like, rate, review, share the podcast, because that helps everything tremendously. That makes the world run smoothly and informedly and being enlightened. I'm going to stop talking now because it's late. But thank you so much, Kevin, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Sounds good. God bless you. Good night.